For 5 straight years, the Ford Taurus was the best-selling car in America, generating roughly a third of Ford's total profits. Ford poured $2.8 billion into its 1996 redesign. Within a year, the Taurus lost its sales crown, earned the nickname Catfish, and began a decline that would eventually erase the nameplate from existence.
The new Ford Taurus. When seen, it leaves an impression.
The Taurus was a car that pulled Ford through a financial crisis that was in 1986 with the launch of the first generation. In its first full year, Taurus sales topped 200,000 units, and by 1992, that figure soared past 400,000. America loved the Taurus so much that for 5 years, from 1992 to 1996, the second-generation Taurus held the crown as America's best-selling car, a title that seemed unshakable. That is until we reached the third generation, a car so bad it destroyed the Taurus's legacy. Or more precisely, it showed Americans that Ford was losing a big part of what made it special. You see, the original Taurus was not just a good car, it represented a culture inside Ford that shaped everything. And on top of that, stood Louis Ferraldi, the man who led the original Team Taurus. The man who was entrusted with the last $3 billion Ford Motor Company had, and he managed to not just save the company, but create a generational car. If the Taurus failed, Ford would have to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Every oval, every flush headlight, every ergonomic knob carried the weight of the entire company. Louis retired in 1989 and died 1 year later. His success still carried on with the second-generation Taurus. After all, it was a redesign that still used the same chassis. The interior was the part that really made the second gen feel like the perfect car. It even added an optional passenger side airbag and was one of the very first cars to achieve a high rating in the new offset crash test. So that means all Ford had to do was continue this streak with a new generation that was supposed to carry the torch. But that was exactly the problem. The original Taurus was designed under a very strict work culture. Everything from design to finance all happened in the same room. By the time the 1996 redesign was underway, the original Team Taurus philosophy had quietly dissolved. Ford never established a common development process modeled after Team Taurus. The Taurus's success, coupled with high profits from the explosion of light truck sales in the 90s, sapped the company's discipline. Ford had forgotten what it had learned, and that is exactly why they were instantly punished. 1996 Ford Taurus third generation is finally released. You can instantly see the difference between the generations, and that was the intention behind the redesign. Jack Telnack, the man who designed the original Taurus, felt the car had grown safe and anonymous, that it had lost the edge that made it revolutionary. So he went the other way, opting for something revolutionary and ironically killed the car completely. There were literally no boxy lines or sharp corners. Wind tunnel tests delivered a modest win, a 0.02 reduction in the drag coefficient, promising a slight bump in fuel economy and a quieter ride. But every curve came with a price. The new single-piece windshield required a custom press. Door panels, now deeply rounded, demanded fresh tooling. Ford's capital budget absorbed over $120 million in new stamping equipment just to make the shapes possible. Engineers raised flags about the added complexity. The oval silhouette forced them to rethink mounting points and panel mass, adding weight and complicating assembly. Marketing teams, too, worried the radical look would test buyer loyalty. Despite these warnings, senior management sided with Telnack. They believed a bold, unmistakable design could keep the Taurus ahead of Japanese rivals. But then we reach the interior, and it gets worse. Taurus introduced a dashboard centerpiece that broke from decades of industry convention, the Integrated Control Panel, ICP. This single-sealed unit combined climate controls, radio, and display into one oval-shaped module welded directly into the dash. Car audio shops found the dash cavity too tight for standard replacements, and even minor repairs often meant replacing the entire module. Owners quickly discovered the drawbacks. Early reliability surveys flagged the ICP for premature button failures and LCD displays that dimmed or flickered in heat and cold. Ford's own warranty data showed the ICP accounted for a disproportionate share of all Taurus service calls in the model's first year, a striking figure for a single component. For drivers used to customizing their cars, the sealed architecture turned the Taurus from a tinkerer's favorite into a closed box. The result was more than just inconvenience. As word spread about difficult repairs and limited upgrade paths, trust in the Taurus's everyday usability began to erode, feeding a cycle of dissatisfaction that would follow the model for years. That is just the interior, but it starts making a lot less sense, especially when you consider finances. Since Ford staked billions on the 1996 Taurus, that budget paid for new stamping equipment, the oval bodywork, and the integrated control panel, every detail engineered to push the sedan into luxury territory. But the bill came due at the showroom. The base price jumped by roughly $2,500 over the outgoing model. For many longtime Taurus buyers, the increase landed hard. The Taurus's starting cost was about $18,000, which is equivalent to roughly $37,000 in today's money. The Taurus, once the smart choice for middle-class families, now sat uncomfortably close to entry-level Lexus and BMW models. If you take all this into account, this story doesn't have to end so badly. Until we consider the incredible crisis of the Taurus SHO, once the performance halo of the lineup. The new 3.4-liter V8 should have been a triumph, but a critical cam sprocket flaw led to widespread engine failures. The failure wasn't mysterious. It was a manufacturing shortcut with catastrophic consequences. Yamaha used a method called swagging to attach the cam sprockets to the hollow camshafts. The method proved inadequate, and the cam sprocket could break loose and spin independently, stopping the camshaft and allowing the pistons to hit the valves, ruining the engine. When the sprocket let go, the engine didn't limp. It died. Repair quotes from dealers ran as high as $10,000, often exceeding the market value of the car itself. As far as we know, about 5 to 10% of the V8 SHOs were affected. Now we have the full picture, and the results were disastrous. More than half, 51%, of all 1996 Tauruses ended up in rental fleets, a figure confirmed by VIN allocation records and industry analysts. This meant that within 2 years, used car lots and auctions were flooded with high-mileage former rental Tauruses, many showing the wear of hard use and minimal upkeep. The effect on resale value was swift and punishing. National headlines and late-night hosts found an easy target in the Taurus's new look. The nickname Catfish stuck, echoing through car magazines and owner forums. Reviewers mocked the oval heavy design, calling it a punchline for suburban driveways. A Ford vice president called the 1996 Taurus launch probably the biggest car launch challenge Ford has ever faced. Inside Ford, planners pored over consumer research and saw the damage was lasting. By 2000, the company rolled out a redesign that abandoned the ovals for a safer, more anonymous shape, and the controversial integrated control panel disappeared from the dash. The shift failed to recapture lost ground. In 2006, the Taurus name quietly disappeared from Ford's lineup. Executives shifted resources to trucks and SUVs, chasing demand that was surging across the industry. The family sedan that once saved Ford had become a lesson in how quickly public opinion and corporate strategy can pivot when a brand's identity is wounded.